Hey guys, no video for our Myths About Japan playlist. We regularly get sent links by people saying, have a look at this. Have you seen this? What do you think of this? And quite often it's something that we haven't seen before. That's quite interesting. Or it's something we have seen before. Or it's something that is sort of a total myth and total nonsense. Or more often than not, there's an element of truth. So what triggered this video was somebody sent us a link. What do you think of this? And it was a story about housewives in Japan, and it quoted some statistic and said something like 70% of 30 to 50-year-old men expect their married men expect their wives to make their meals for them. And there was a picture. It was actually a Facebook post, and there was a photo of a guy sitting on a sofa or sitting at the dining room table, and his wife in the kitchen getting dinner for him. And obviously that's a provocative post, right? That they know that's going to get lots of views because some people will be really triggered by that. Because it's basically saying, look at these sexist Japanese men, sort of thing, right? That was the way it was presented. And there's no doubt that statistic is probably accurate. In actual fact, it seems a bit low. If you know, because from what we see, from our Japanese neighbours and our Japanese family members and our Japanese friends, and it is usually the case that the wives, if it's a married couple, that the wives do the cooking, and that's pretty much what we see all the time. We do know a couple of guys are into cooking, but generally it's the Japanese wives that do all the cooking and all the work in the kitchen. So that's true. However, they're really only telling you half the story, because the other half of the story is that Japanese husbands are expected to bring in all the income and usually hand it over to their wives, which is a bit of another story. But the Japanese husbands are expected to bring in the income, and if they don't do a good job of that, they're pretty well frowned on by everybody, by their wives and by their wives' friends and their wives' family and their own family. Everybody, male and female, old and young, expects the husband, generally expects the husband in the family to bring home the money. So the accurate way to present that story would be that Japanese married relationships in Japan are often, or mostly, or generally, old style gender roles, that the husband brings in the money and the wife looks after the kitchen. That's a more accurate way to present it. It probably wouldn't get as many clicks, and it probably wouldn't infuriate as many emotional people, but it would be more accurate. So it is just the way it is. It is just the way it is. That as is often the case in Japan, the technology is 21st century, but the society and the relationships and so on tend to be a bit more 1950s. We find that a lot when we discuss Japanese life with our older Australian family members. You know, we've got one Australian family member in particular is 80 years old, and when we tell her about some stuff in Japan, or when she sees it, sometimes she comes here, she often comments, it used to be like this in Australia in the 1950s. You know, when I was a girl, this was really normal in Australia. And that's often the case, that Japan's relationships and society sort of issues are quite often the way it was in the rest of the world in the 1950s. And this is a classic example. You know those old style 1950s advertisements with the wife in the kitchen with the apron and the husband, you know, in his suit coming home from work? We see those in advertising in Japan now. Not sure, did we ever do a video about the aprons? We might have. Quite common to see ladies, usually older ladies, not usually younger ladies, but quite common to see ladies in the supermarket or shopping centre, or pretty well anywhere, just walking around, travelling around the streets, in an apron, in their kitchen apron. And it's sort of like a uniform, you know, showing that they're busy doing the domestic chores, right? And very much like one of those 1950s advertisements, you know, of the housewife in her apron getting dinner ready for husband when he comes home from work. And that's life in Japan. Not always. Not always. I mean, we also know a Japanese couple, who both of them have really well-paid jobs. And in fact, we're having a conversation recently, and both of them are really, really well paid. And the guy commented recently that she earns more money than he does. Considerably more, he said, because her industry is a better paying industry than his is, and her position's really good, and she earns more money than he does. He didn't have an issue with that, by the way. So, you know, those guys aren't fitting into that stereotype at all. However, you know, and we can give you other examples of variations, but the majority of the married people that we know live that style where the lady looks after the house and the guy goes off to work, particularly when there's kids involved, of course. If there are no kids involved, quite often the lady will have a full-time job. If there are kids involved, the lady might have a part-time job, or she might not. She might not have a job at all, and she might just look after the house, and that's really, really common. Really, really common. It's considered to be normal. And if we go to the school, if we go to the elementary school where our kids go, if we go to their school during the day, it's usually the mothers that are there, you know, and we'll go to there for some event. The occasional father will be there, usually a father who works shift work or something, who's available, who's come to the event, but usually it's the mothers. And, you know, at the end of the event, some of the mothers might go off somewhere to drink coffee or tea, or, you know, have a little group meeting somewhere, because they're free until the kids finish school. So that's the whole story, you know. So if they were really interested in presenting real Japan to you, that's what they would have shown you, the whole story. But in actual fact, they know. I mean, this is the problem, and we see it too, because we post videos about Japan, so we spend time posting our videos, and we watch our own videos, of course. We always run any video we post, we always run it all the way through to make sure it hasn't got any problems when we first post it. We always post stuff on Facebook, of course. So because of that activity, always in our recommended feeds from YouTube and Facebook, we always see stuff about Japan by other people, you know. And because when we started doing this 10, 12 years ago, there was not a lot of people doing it in English. You know, there was Japanese people posting stuff about Japan, but there weren't a lot of people posting stuff about Japan compared to now, relative to now, you know. And because now everyone's doing it. Anybody that comes to Japan for 5 minutes, in actual fact, a lot of those really big millionaire YouTubers, you know, front page YouTubers, big earners with their directors and their professional cameras and all that sort of stuff, a lot of those guys will actually come here for 2 or 3 days to make videos about Japan, and then go again and go back and edit their videos together professionally and post them and get millions of views. So, you know, and you get people coming here for holidays, or people are coming here for 6 months or whatever, and so everybody's making videos and posting stuff about Japan. And because, you know, a lot of it's really good content, but quite often, you know, it depends on the focus. If it's a big group, if it's like a professional, one of these professional YouTube groups where you got a bunch of people making a living out of it, making money out of it, getting millions of views, those guys are really focused on views, aren't they? You know, so they're wanting to get views. And it's the same as with Facebook and all those guys. If their main focus is getting views and getting clicks and getting attention, then this is the sort of stuff that they'll post. I mean, there's another one that comes up in our feed all the time. There's one particular professional group, money-making group, that posts stories, not really stories, but they do posts about the Japanese school uniform at least once a month. Same people, and it's not informative. It's not giving any information about the topic. It's just blatant. It's just pictures of Japanese schoolgirls in the shortest skirts they could find. You know, the pictures, whether they got the pictures from Google or wherever they got them, of Japanese schoolgirls in the shortest skirts that they could find, with just a, you know, in Japan the school uniform is popular and an icon, and it's modelled on a sailor suit, that sort of thing, right? So there's no real sort of insight or any sort of information about it. It's just blatantly clickbait, you know, to get attention. And so the point of this video is to answer that person who said, have you seen this, is it true? Yeah, it is. But as with a lot of these myths, most of them are based on fact. Most of them have an element of fact to them. You know, the other one we see a lot is you'll get some little group. You know, a while ago there was a group of people in Tokyo that were injecting, this is quite a few years ago, injecting their foreheads with saline, so salt water, and making a shape of a bagel on their forehead, right? And it's just a group of them doing it. There's 127 million people in Japan, so now and again, you know, you might get a group of 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 do some weird stuff, right? And then what happens is these people that love, just, you know, out to get clicks and attention, will post stories like that, and inevitably it ends up getting presented like it's a trend, the latest trend from Japan. You know, in Japan, people are injecting themselves with saline, and they'll write it like it's like everyone's doing it, you know. And in actual fact, quite often those things, that's the sort of shit people send to us. Have you seen this? And quite often it's weird shit like that we haven't seen because some little group in Tokyo or a little group somewhere have done this thing, and it's ended up on the internet, and then it got picked up by the mainstream media, and then it's all over the place that there's this big trend in Japan. And we've seen nothing of it. We've seen nothing of it on Japanese TV. We've heard nothing from it from anybody we know, you know. And it's clearly not a trend. It's clearly just a couple of people have done this thing. So the point of this video was the guy who sent us the message about this and asked, have you seen this? Yeah, well, that's the whole story. You know, it's not just that the Japanese husband saying get in the kitchen. It's just the style of society that Japan still is. That everybody expects that the housewives be good housewives and look after the house, and everybody expects that the hubby goes off and earns his money. We actually know one guy who got married, and not long after he got married he lost his job, and he spent 12 months, he was trying to find a job, but he wasn't really quite trying hard enough, and his wife left him. Oh, this is another interesting thing too. We might have done a video on this a long time ago, but if you ask ladies from some countries, you know, what you look for in a husband, they'll say, oh, someone who's funny and good looking and this and that and the other. We asked a lot of Japanese ladies this question, you know, lots and lots, young ones and old ones, and just everybody we know. We still ask this question sometimes if people are talking about relationships. Quite often we'll say, what do you look for in a husband or a boyfriend, you know? And the first thing they always say, yasashi, kind. Want a husband who's kind. The second thing they almost always say, he must have a good job. That's the second thing. Before they get to he should be cool or good looking, or he should be funny or any of that stuff, before they get to that, number one, kind, because they don't want an asshole that's going to abuse them. So they want a kind one. Number two, good job. Good job, right? They expect him to have a good job and a good income and you know, support the family. So that's the full story. So yeah, to that person, there's the full story. It's not that, you know, the Japanese husbands are telling the wives to get in the kitchen and make them a sandwich. It's that the Japanese society, everyone in society, expects, you know, if you're a Japanese hubby and you're not bringing in the income, everyone's going to give you a hard time about it. Men, women, young, old, family members, neighbours, everybody is going to be looking down at you thinking, ooh, what's the story with him not bringing in the income? You know, and a house that's not kept well, or people that aren't well fed or whatever, they're going to look at the housewife in the same way. So, you know, that's the way it is. So that's why we always try to show you guys, this is probably one benefit. You know, we hesitated to get involved in Patreon because we always worried about being compromised, you know, that people might try to put pressure on us to do this type of video or not that type of video, or try and alter our content or mess with what sort of content we put up. But what we've found is that the people who support us on Patreon support us because they like our content the way we present it, and that we don't have professional cameras and professional editors, and we don't go for the let's look at school uniforms just for the hell of it. Although we have done school uniform videos based on giving you some sort of information about it. The way we present our content, and good and bad too. Because that's another thing as well. Anything negative or critical, anything that could be seen as negative, we try and stay impartial. It's hard sometimes, but we try not to be judgmental, but we just try and show you what there is. But anything that's sort of considered to be negative or doesn't cast Japan in a positive light is usually unpopular. You know, any video that we make where we sort of show something about Japan that might be considered not good or might not make people feel warm and fuzzy will often be unpopular and get lots of thumbs down and things like that, and not a lot of views, and you know, that sort of thing. And you'll notice that those YouTubers who make the big money and who get lots and lots of views, we're just going to shift and park in the shade, guys. It's 37 degrees today. Camera's getting hot. But those people who make those really popular videos tend to steer clear of anything sort of dramatic. They like what's the word? What's that word for like that thing about the get in the kitchen woman type video? What's that? Controversial type. They do like controversial topics, of course, because they do get attention and views. But they don't like things that are negative, because if they do something negative, it won't be popular. You know. So whereas the way we see it is, if there's some aspect about Japan that we think is interesting, whether it be considered positive or negative or good or bad or whatever, we don't sort of hesitate. If we think it's interesting, we figure there'll be someone out there who'll think it's interesting, and we'll post it. And that's the thing with the Patreon thing is, you know, we've never really worried about views and subscribers and, you know, getting more, you know, and trying to get big views and big clicks and big. We've never really pushed for that. And then since we've had Patreon, that's made us even more sort of bulletproof when it comes to that sort of thing, because we don't sort of care, because as long as our 184 patrons are supporting our channel, and as long as they're happy with the content, we're not going to be swayed into anything. But we do listen. You know, if people say they like the unskilled labourer videos, all right, we'll spend 20 hours editing one of those for you. Or, you know, if people say they like the driving around in the car videos, well, we're happy to make them too. But if people say, oh, please don't make videos like that, we don't like that, that's not going to happen, because we figure that we present everything, because otherwise you're not getting the whole story, are you? And that was a classic example. Just telling you about the wife getting in the kitchen part of that story, you can see the difference, can't you? If you just present it like that the Japanese husbands expect their wives to get in the kitchen and make them a sandwich. If you present it like that, then the image that you're getting is Japanese husbands are sexist assholes, where in actual fact that's not the case. The whole society is still working with those gender roles where they consider that those gender roles are normal, that the wife looks after the house and the husband looks after the income, generally, not always, as was explained earlier. So when you present it like that, it's a totally different story. It's not as dramatic, is it? It's not as controversial. It's not as provocative. It's not likely to stir someone up as much. So that's why they don't tell you the whole story. Sometimes what happens is it's innocent. It's just that somebody's picked up a story from somewhere, and that's what'll happen with that story, won't it? Is that other people will pick up on that and they'll report that as well. And they'll share that, and because it's got a statistic in it, they'll use that statistic and they'll present that. So sometimes it's just because the people don't know the whole story, but they're still presenting what little they have to the rest of the world. And quite often, probably more often, it's just clickbait, isn't it? They don't really care what the real story is. They're just wanting to get the clicks, get the views, get the money, get the income. So, I mean, and that's always going to be the case, isn't it? You know, YouTube's got more and more like that, and we see that all the time, don't we? And that's always going to be the case. that some people, they're either trying to make more money or they're trying to get more famous. You know, they want to be famous on YouTube, or they want to be famous, trying to be famous and that sort of stuff. So that's always going to be the case. What we say is just be careful when you see content on the internet about Japan. Just, you know, check it out. Keep it in the back of your mind that it's possibly not the whole story that you're getting there, you know, and that possibly when you dig deeper you'll find out more to it. This living here is like that. Living here is like that. Quite often somebody will say something, or there'll be something, and you think, oh, that's terrible, that's not right, and then after a while, after a few years, you start to realise, no, that sort of does make more sense. You know, something that you thought at first was really weird. Every time the sun shines, everybody hangs their futons out, goes outside, drop cups of water outside the front door to cool things down, stuff like that. And at first you see things like that and you think, that's pretty weird. And then after a while you start to realise, no, if you don't hang your futon out in the sun every now and again, it starts to go mouldy. So a lot of it's like that. When you don't know the full story, it seems weird, and then when you know the full story, oh yeah, it does make sense. Not always. There's a lot of stuff here that's weird, and after 20 years it still seems weird. Because it's weird. There's some genuinely weird stuff here, which we try and show you as well on our odd stuff about Japan playlist. But this is the myths about the Japan playlist, so look out for the mythy stuff. Look out for the BS, because there's a lot of it. So anyway, there it was. Before I go, quick plug for Patreon. It's because of Patreon that we can do videos like this. It's because of the 184 people on Patreon, and we need some more. It's dropped down. So if you're not on Patreon already, if you like our content and you want us to keep making content just like this, and better, a lot of it's better than this, please check out our Patreon page. There's always a link under every video. More videos coming soon.